I was telling Ravi, Athlon's regional magazine came out because I was perusing at the grocery store yesterday, and lo and behold, we've got Julian Sand, Dylan Riola, Drew Aller, and Ernest Hausman, the cover. The one defensive guy happens to be a guy that I am a huge fan of playing for another school. I- I mean, we're happy, right? We like young people from the state, but man,
Yeah.
that I'm hoping Nebraska's linebacking core is really good this year.
No, I got you. I'm not surprised about Hausman.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, good for him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good for him. He found a spot and he's excelling. The funny thing about him is that I remember near the end of his season at Nebraska when he was starting to break out. It was his last press conference he did, and I asked a question about like him returning next year and being one of the leaders in the room. And I remember he gave kind of a general answer, and I was like, that was interesting. And then a few weeks later, he wasn't in the program anymore. So I wish him all the success though. And it doesn't surprise me because he was showing the signs as a really young player that he had just the instincts to rack up tackles and be that kind of guy in the second level. But I do think Nebraska's linebacker core is going to be all right, but they got a lot to prove.
BC does it kind of surprise you that they went with Hausman as the defensive player though? Because I mean, there's pretty good defensive players in the league.
Yeah, I guess so. That's a big thing for him. I don't know. Was that just
as a non-full-time starter?
Regional cover where they knew they could like pick a few Nebraska, like kind of hurt Nebraskans' heart walking by that ID or whatever. Maybe that's what it was.
Not funny, BC. I can't believe I laughed at that.
But yeah, there's a lot of probably other guys you could have put up there, but
especially like if you're
getting that. That's one of those things. If I got on a magazine cover like that, you know, you'd have that like tucked away when you're 70 years old still. So that's cool.
In the old archives. BC, let me ask you something. We're kind of not hinting. We've been trying to break down all these moves and again the middle of the pack in the Big Ten and who's going to be what. Let me start closer to the top. Who do you believe in more for this year, USC or Michigan?
USC. I mean, I give Michigan credit for actually maximizing. Would they end up 8-5 last year when they actually got the bowl win?
Yeah,
that says that I thought that was going to be a 5-win team for like in October, and so I actually thought from a win perspective they got as much out of it as I could have assumed. So I kind of give Sharon more credit in that respect, but I'm the jury's still out for me on him and just how that operation is going to move forward. It feels like they've just had a lot of distractions, and I know they did well a few years ago when they had all that talent about us against the world, and they kind of beat back on everything that was out there and every headline that came out against them. But I just wonder if there's a point where that wear and tear is tough to keep on keeping on, so to speak. So I don't know. I think USC they're always going to be as talented as anybody. Last year with the opportunity to, their initial glance at the Big Ten and okay, this is what it is. This is how the styles are over here and over there in the league. I think that could be beneficial. Whatever people think of Lincoln Riley, I just think he's one of the best offensive minds and tends to figure stuff out. So I'd pick USC in that one.
Okay, both these teams have a win total of 7.5. Who's more apt to make a move, Minnesota or Iowa?
I'd say Iowa. They got a really tough schedule though.
Minnesota's interesting only because of how their home games fall, right? But I was shocked to see that they both have the same win total, right there with Illinois. But I know how you feel about Illinois, so I didn't ask. But I do. Don't you think the Minnesota at 7.5 with Iowa is interesting for Minnesota?
Yeah, it is. Minnesota is Iowa's the answer most people would give off the cuff, just because they're like, look at, you just sort of expect Iowa somehow, some way, the way it's been recently, can find a way to 8 or 9 wins. I'm not as sure of that with Minnesota, even though they've kind of been around that region the last few years. That's a good question the more I think about it, because I was thinking like 2 weeks ago about Iowa's schedule, and they hit, for whatever reason, I know Husker fans would agree with this, it feels like they've, generally speaking, gotten the better end of scheduling for most of a decade. There's been a couple of years where it hasn't been that way, but you're always like, man, how'd they get that draw? And for once, you can't say that. So that's a tough one. I'll say Iowa just because they do tend to find a way to that 8-win mark. I sort of think that's their high water mark, though, and I don't think Minnesota's going to get there. I think they're going to be at 6 or 7.
Minnesota's tough, man. They've got at Ohio State, at Iowa, at Oregon, plus Nebraska and Wisconsin at home. Like, that's a tough schedule.
Yeah, I like their games at home, though.
I mean, so they've got at home, they've got Michigan State, Nebraska, Purdue, Rutgers, and then non-con.
What I'm saying is you can make hay.
I mean, if you win your home games and then your non-cons, you're looking at 7 still.
Yeah, you can make hay.
The question of the win total, that still puts them below the 7.5.
I hear you.
The team that can ding Minnesota, and it's always the team that can ding Minnesota and has let them off the hook, is Nebraska. I mean, you go back through the last 5 or 6 years, PJ Fleck in 3 or 4 of those seasons, they've sort of been on the brink when they've played the Huskers that week. And there was an opportunity for Nebraska to put their face in the mud, and they missed it. And so, again, in the middle of the season, that game's in October on a Friday night there now, we know. That would be a case where if Nebraska wins, that'll be a big say in what we're talking about with Minnesota's win total, because I think they could really take away their momentum going to the back half.
Yeah, BC, I look at those. I tend to think you're right, too, because that Minnesota, it's uncanny, not just how Nebraska, because I think if I'm understanding what you're saying right, it's not just how Nebraska has lost those games, it's where Minnesota was coming into those games in terms of how their season was going, and they seem to have figured it out in order to get through Nebraska. And it seems like their seasons really could have flipped the other way.
Yes.
If Nebraska was able to hold on to some of those games.
I mean, you could say the same with Iowa in some years. Iowa's won that close game, and it's been the one that's tipped it toward, they're feeling positive across the border about how their season went, as opposed to the other way. And that was the biggest, as painful, I think, as anything for Nebraska fans. It wasn't just that their own program wasn't quite getting that win they needed to put some steam behind them. It was that you were also elevating your peers in the region along the way by dropping those kind of games. And so there was a kind of a double whammy to it.
Go ahead.
Well, so you said something interesting there, BC, because, we talk a lot about, and DB and I have talked a lot about how Nebraska has to kind of pass some of these other teams, the Iowas, the Minnesotas that are sort of in this pack ahead of them. But it's interesting you said that Nebraska has sort of helped elevate them. It's not just Nebraska's absence has allowed them. It does seem like Nebraska has actively helped elevate some of these programs by the way those games have gone. And I guess I've never really thought about it in those terms.
So this is weird, but along those lines, that's exactly how I feel about Iowa's program. Because for all the success Iowa's had outside of Nebraska, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
Just imagine if Nebraska finds ways to not lose those games. Can you imagine the sentiment around Iowa City, given all the other things that they have going well, if Nebraska just finds a way to capitalize on putting the nail in the coffin?
On countless opportunities they've had to beat.
They would feel much differently about that program. But because they're beating Nebraska in addition to, it's like,
if they're winning 7-8 a year, but they lose 7 out of 10 in Nebraska, we're having a different conversation.
It's a way different conversation.
I've got one for you guys, and it might be something stupid to say out loud. Do you think it could be sneaky good for Nebraska in 25 that they lost that Iowa? I'm going to go to a quote Rhule said about after they lost to Iowa, and there was that tough period sort of a couple weeks where guys are entering the portal, you're losing some assistant coaches, all that stuff. And he spoke about how the team really came together. And I think he even used the phrase turning point as they headed to the Pinstripe Bowl, like how connected they were. Obviously, they got the win there. I was thinking about this recently, how had they they beat Wisconsin 44-25, and had they won that Iowa game and then won the bowl game, the sort of extra juice that would be in the air right now that is maybe missing a little bit going into this year. And in some way, I wonder if it's okay that Nebraska went through that obstacle of December, losing that game, having to come together through it, and maybe there is a little less juice because of it, and that's okay on the outside. I don't know. I was just wondering if it's something that could be useful for them going forward. Obviously, you never want to lose a game. You guys know I feel that way, but I wonder if in the big picture it could work for this team.
There is a part of me that wonders, right? Because that sort of lines up with the Holgorsen taking over as OC, right? Where you have the USC was the first one, right? Then they have the bye week. They go Wisconsin, Iowa bowl game. And my thought goes, okay, you understand USC coming out of the gate. You don't really have it together yet. It's a 1 week deal. And then you go to Wisconsin. If they had gone Wisconsin the way they did, and then let's say they put up 28 points against Iowa, which is a big number against Iowa, right? And then the bowl game goes the way it does. It does make me wonder that, like, sometimes you don't necessarily want the magic fix or the thing that appears to be the magic fix.
Yeah.
Then you don't, like, you're not really prepared to be like, oh, we've got Dana Holgorsen now, everything's going to be fine. It's like, nope, you still have to fight through it. Like,
yeah.
There's part of me that wonders if that's really valuable this year. Like you were kind of saying, be like, hey, yes, Dana Holgorsen helps a lot. We still have to fight through it.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. You want to beat Iowa. They would have rather won that game, and everybody around here would have rather that happen. I'm just when I heard Rhule talk about that December and how that team connected leading into New York, and they faced that adversity, and you know, I don't know. You always look at things like that. Can there be something in there that this group going forward uses toward a positive? So we'll see. But yeah, Iowa's definitely a team that, if you look at their track record, they've had good seasons, and and Nebraska, because of losing most of those games to them, has always let the Hawkeyes sort of like, oh yeah, they feel pretty good going to a bowl game. It was a really solid year in Iowa City, where if Nebraska had finished the deal in the last minute or two, that's how thin the line is between narratives flipping for one side and the other side.
I mean, we talk about this, obviously, BC, you talk about, well, obviously you always want to win the game, right? And this is a much larger scale, but I think back to what DB's told me about, like, that 93 team that loses to Florida State, right? And how that directly impacted them winning it in 94. Like, obviously you'd prefer to win the national championship in 93, but you maybe don't get the same thing down the line without the loss. So I think it's obviously a much grander scale, talking about national championship won or loss versus just a seventh win of the season. But I don't think it's crazy to say, hey, like, this can actually be beneficial, even if we wouldn't have chosen that path.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what sort of stuff galvanizes this group, but I do think they felt like something really good happened in December going to New York. And, for whatever the reasons that connected those dots, you hope that you just keep building on that month by month as you get into this season now.
BC, when you're taking a look at, obviously with Archie on campus, and kind of knew that was coming, finally got him there. We're starting summer workouts, and I asked this to Sam, so I want to say it a different way, because I don't think special teams is necessarily flying under the radar. But do you think we grasp the magnitude of what could happen if it's at least functional?
I think we have an idea, but we might be underestimating how massive it could be, like how much it's actually worth in wins and losses, and
like a 7-yard return, or making 90% of field goals inside of 40 yards, or like
never having to worry about getting a punt off.
It seems huge.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the biggest things, and this is what Eckler's Tennessee teams were so good at, and this is why, when he was like, I'm going to go get my punter, I'm going to find a guy. You kind of got to trust him on this, because he did the same thing at Tennessee. And to me, one of the most impressive stats he had was they led the country for like the last couple of years in pinning people inside like the 10 or the 20-yard line. And then what they would do is they'd take advantage. Like there's a sequence in a critical game that Tennessee won a couple years ago where his unit pins somebody at the 2-yard line, defense gets the 3 and out, and then they return the punt for a touchdown. And that's what won the game. And I think that combination of if you can find a unit too that's really excels at winning that field position battle, and then you have an opportunistic defense that's really strong in those instances about, like, let's say the opponent starts on their own 5-yard line. Don't just stop them after they get 3 first downs and flip the field. Have that defensive possession from John Butler's group where you put the hammer down and you get the ball back on the other team's 35-yard line, and then you punch it in. Like those are the moments, like some of these teams in the Big Ten, when we talk about like Iowa and stuff, have used to get over the hump in some of these close games, and Nebraska hasn't quite done as efficient as you would like. And if they could do something like that and have that cocktail, in 25, it's worth like 2 wins. I mean, that sort of stuff right there. And then you could add on, like, if they have the guy who can hit the 42-yarder and you expect it to go in. I mean, that's everything anymore.
BC, so for a lot of pressure on the offense to be better, right? The hope and faith is in Rhule. The intrigue is in, can the defense ramp up, right? What's a new post Tony White defense look like with all these new pieces? Then there's the special teams. When I asked you to rank them in February, you put the offense first. Is the offense still first for you in terms of steps that need to be taken to get the wins Nebraska wants?
Was the question you asked in February is about all 3 units?
Yeah. We ranked them.
Okay.
And I think the consensus was most people started with offense.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it centered around Rhule. Has your sentiment or rationale changed along those lines?
And the question was about improvement, right?
Yeah, I got you. It's a close question. Don't get me wrong. I'm fine with sticking with offense, and I'll just to make my argument. I just think, and I don't want to go too crazy with stats, but they've been sort of in a yards per play category, like around 100th, like 95th to 105th, something like that. And, if you were like an offensive unit that was like top 40 even, and you combine that with a defense that, as Rhule says, they always play pretty good defense. He expects that. I think he thinks they're going to do that again this year. If they're a top 20 defensive unit and it's got that mixture with the top 35, top 40 offense, that right there, to me, we're talking about like an 8 or 9 win team then. And then if the special teams is good, really good, then who knows? That's where the dreamers start to really dream, and it's one of those kind of seasons. But I think it starts with the offense and they have to make as much of a jump. As much as we bemoaned special teams last year, statistically speaking, the offense still has a lot of rungs on the ladder to climb from last season's numbers to be an elite football team. And so I'll go with them still.
Yeah, I do. We've talked a lot about just getting functional in special teams. Like, hey, just don't be terrible. Don't be.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a part of me that wonders. You brought up Eckler. You brought up his history with Tennessee. You brought up how good they've been in certain areas of special teams. And like, I don't know if I'm, just too busy sipping Kool-Aid over here with my, record predictions of what I think they can be this year and whatever. But I do sometimes wonder, like, what if they're actually good at special teams? Like, not a disaster, not just functional, not just getting you back to zero. What if they're actually good at special teams?
Yeah, and the other part of that where you could make an argument,
dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
They'd actually be dangerous, in my opinion.
And to go with that, guys, if you were to say, well, special teams is number 1 on my list, if they were really good and you have a bunch of guys who aren't necessarily starters contributing and making plays with that unit, where they just, like, on Monday after a game, they come into the offices and they did something special out there on the field in a special teams capacity, that builds up the whole locker room and just the chemistry as you go through the season when you've got more guys who feel like they have a say in it. So from like a whole team perspective, that would be an argument where you could say special teams is top too, because it could include more guys into the difference of between winning and losing. And then you've really got something in your locker room when you've got that feeling. And a lot of guys feel like, hey, I can help us settle the score on Saturday. I can be that guy. And so that'd be a big deal.
Yeah, I do. Like I pick offense first too, but I feel like we haven't really allowed ourselves to wonder what it might look like if it's better than just not disastrous on special teams. Like we haven't really had that conversation yet, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, we've got to learn a lot about the new punter too. It's going to be a tough assignment coming right in, if he's the guy right off the bat, and as you'd kind of expect he would be. There's a definite reason he picked him. I know that Mike Eckler, going back to his time at Tennessee and probably before that, has a really tight relationship with the Pro Kick Australia guys. So I think he has a really good read on who's what, in that operation and coming up there. So, but it does take time sometimes to figure it out. And obviously he's going to have some pressure on him as a young guy. That's not an easy role to step into given what's happened here the last few years.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, appreciate the time as always.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, B.
Good stuff there from Brian Christopherson. It's funny that we brought up, or that he kind of brought up, and you brought up special teams and Eckler, because I saw a quote from Andy Staples yesterday, basically saying that he thought Eckler was the single biggest addition to Nebraska over the offseason. And I think that's kind of what I was getting at, right? Like,
look, you don't have to really convince me, even though I love Rhule as much as I do with Holgorsen, because they've been historically bad on special teams.